Hello and welcome everybody. So this is Question Corner 17, where we answer Camunda questions, and sometimes we have special topics, like in this very case right now, where our special topic is community projects, both how to create them, some people who have created them, and how Camunda can help you with them. We have a bunch of people. Usually I put all the featured people right down here in the very bottom, but there are too many. And so we welcome the community, which is also a very good show. People should watch that. It's kind of fun. We will introduce them as Noah's Ark always suggested we should, in twos. As your host, I am Niall Deehan, and I'm being joined by Nele Uhlemann. We'll be hosting this lovely thing, and we do at the last Thursday of every month. So you'll see us again if you show up to the next Question Corner. Nele is the one on the left there. Next up, we have two Camunda champions who are joining, both Camunda champions and people who contributed really useful plugins and additional code for the community, and that will be Florian and Tobias. Thank you very much for joining. You will hear all from them very shortly. Then, of course, after they've talked about the kinds of experience they've had with building their project and the project themselves, we will then hear from Danielle and Rin. Danielle and Rin are the probably people you may have already bumped into at some stage if you have been interested in sort of contributing in some way to our open source projects or creating your own. And they'll be discussing ways in which Camunda has sort of helped people join in with contributions, or at least show you how you might want to get started. Now, during this, we will take questions about basically anything, but I'm sure you'll have lots of questions about the various projects that we're showing, and we're going to be doing that through Slido. So Slido is, if you scan this QR code there with your phone, you'll have a little place where you can add questions. There's already a bunch of them there, but you can also go to slido.com and enter that little #QC17, or you can also follow a link, which I assume is being pasted into the chat. Now, as well as enjoying other people's questions, you can also enjoy, if you ask, what was that? Yeah, sorry, that was me opening this bad boy right here. We are going to be given away a homebrewed Camunda beer to the best question, assuming that we can post beer to them. If not, you'll get something else. So yes, please send in good questions. Quality is important. Nele will be deciding who has done the right questions, so you really want to gear them towards the kind of questions that she might like. So we'll do that at the end. So yeah.
Maybe make sure to include the name to your question. We cannot give things away if we don't know your name.
That's true. So... Neil has been asked in the past to stop sending beer anonymously to people. So we have to actually get your name if you're going to answer some questions. Super duper. And as we said, your questions are really easy to send in. When you see Slido, you'll see the ability to either add your own questions or upvote questions that you think are worth hearing the answer to. Your questions are the most important questions because, of course, there you have come along to this lovely event, and of course you deserve all the attention that you get. So please note that your questions will be prioritized to a certain degree. And with that, I'm going to start off with actually a very quick poll that I created because I'm interested in what people are currently thinking about in terms of their contributions to Camunda. So how do you feel about making contributions to open source projects? So do you already plan on it? Are you short of an idea? Do you not like the work that's involved, or are you big into some fun proprietary code that everyone loves? It's good stuff already. I suspect, I really hope no one says I'm going to keep my code to myself. That would just make me sad. Okay, that's good. Okay, marvelous. That is... Ideas are the hard part, right? I think I have a lot of ideas and zero follow through. So I think that's the opposite of my problem. Super. Good stuff. I'm very glad that we have people who are interested in contributing. I'll leave that for a little longer. And right now I'm going to open the questions back up in a couple of seconds, but I'm going to pass you on to Tobias. Now, Tobias has shown up quite a lot in the community discussing his Micronaut projects, more than one Micronaut orientated project from Tobias. And today he's going to explain a little bit about those and explain what they're for, how they're used, and how they affect the community. So I'll throw it to you, Tobias. I'll stop sharing so you can.
Thank you, Niall. Am I sharing the correct screen?
You are indeed.
Yes. Okay. So hello, everyone. I think you might have seen the release webinar of the Camunda Platform 7.16. And there Niall actually showed a slide where he showed the different platforms with which you can integrate Camunda. And there's one small bar there called Micronaut Camunda. And I would like to talk more about that one in the next 5 minutes. And I'll actually try to code something. I'll hope that I can code faster than Niall speaks and that we actually manage to finish something in those 5 minutes. So let's now switch to the modeler. I'm going to try to implement this model. So we have a very simple model here with a service task, with a user task, and with a service task again. The important part is that we reference a bean here. Okay, so we're going to implement that, and it's actually quite easy. There is something there called Micronaut launch. Let's just go one step back. What is Micronaut? So Camunda has the vision to automate any process anywhere, right? And from my point of view, this should also include Micronaut. What is Micronaut? Micronaut is basically a framework similar to Spring Boot, but it is optimized regarding resource usage. And I think we've built a very nice open source integration to embed Micronaut Camunda into a Micronaut project. So let's do that and automate the process I just showed you. So we can use this web page, which is similar to the start.spring.io page. We give it a name. We select a feature. So as you can see here, our open source project is already available here on this public page. I will not go into the second project with which you can implement external workers. The only thing I need to select here additionally is the Jetty server. And then we're basically already ready to push this to GitHub. And once it's there, all we need to do is we can copy this and we can basically start. If you look into the existing directory, it has now created this directory here, and I have 2 files here. What I'm going to do is copy them to this newly created directory. Source main resources. So basically that's a process model and a form. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start this project in IntelliJ, and then we're simply going to start it and have a look how this is going to work out. So the first thing I need to do is I need to add a very simple configuration. Unfortunately, it's a little bit slower when we're screen sharing, but I think we can cope with that. So going to the application properties, that's quite similar as you know it from Spring Boot. We basically configure an admin user, we enable the web applications and the REST interface. And I need to do one more thing because the Micronaut launch does not yet include the very latest release from us. I'll switch that to 2.2. And then we just do a simple Gradle refresh. And then we can already start our application. There it is. And I can now log in with the credentials which we saw previously. I can go to the task list, and remember I copied the process model into the resources. This is called the onboarding process. I can start it, and it fails. Why does it fail? Because we didn't implement the bean. Remember the service task I showed you previously. So all we do now is that we go back into our project and we create two beans. The first is the score customer bean. And similar to Spring Boot, I now mark this as a singleton so that this is bean managed. I implement the Java delegate interface. And all we're going to do is create a log statement for now, because that's the easiest thing to do. And so that it's easy to see, I'll log this out as a warning, because then it's bright red. And as you remember, there were two beans I need to implement, so I'll implement the second one as well. This one was called create customer. And all we need to do now is restart the application again. Camunda is now embedded into Micronaut. We go back here, we refresh. And if we now go back here, we can see that this should now start. Yeah, it says the process has been started. And we can now open the form, the user form. And as you can see here, the new feature from Camunda since Camunda 7.15 is that you can use the Camunda forms. And at the very beginning, I copied the form into the resources directory, so it's available here. I can now complete my process. And if we now look into the logs, we can actually see that both service tasks have been executed. So as you can see, I think we've built a very nice integration with which you can in a very fast way create an application using Camunda. And if you look into this web page, you can see that we have quite a few features which we've documented here. We have a very nice getting started. And I'd be very happy if you tried this out and yeah, just give us some feedback.
Super.
Was that fast enough?
That was so quick. That was literally just as fast as I talk. And whoever thought that was possible. Since I have you, there are some questions that people have added in. So I'm going to give them to you now before we call Florian in. So the first one is someone has asked, I've never used Micronaut. From the point of developing, what are the biggest differences compared with other options?
Well, if you know Spring Boot, it's quite similar. So you also have dependency injection, as you saw the singleton annotation. You have auto wiring, so that's quite similar. So I think everyone coming from Spring Boot can very easily continue with Micronaut. When I started, it was quite easy for me. All I really had to look up is how the annotations are called, but in most cases they're very similar. So if you just want to create a simple application, I think you'll be up and running in minutes. Yeah.
Nice. And another question here that I'll just do before I move on to Florian is, does Micronaut require Gradle to build it, or is that just your preference?
It's my personal preference, but actually Micronaut works a little bit better with Gradle. Micronaut uses the so-called ahead of time compilation approach. So basically all the magic that Spring tries to do at runtime, Micronaut tries to do this at compilation time. And if you use Gradle, it can much better make use of the Delta compilation that Maven can. And that's the reason why I would actually recommend to use Gradle instead of Maven. But if you use Maven, it will also work. You might need to do a clean install in between.
Super, thank you so much. So I will let more questions come in while we continue the rest, and we'll come back again at the end. But thanks very much, Tobias. And I really do like the Micronaut plugin. I also really love that people should know there's a Micronaut external task worker, which is also worth taking a look at. I think that's really handy. Has loads of really useful functionalities around speed. So yeah, thanks so much. So we'll talk to you now in a few minutes. But until then, I'm going to now introduce and welcome Florian. So Florian, again, another Camunda champion, someone who is happy to wear that title on their hoodie, and is going to discuss another very different kind of community project that they've been able to make. So Florian, take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will share the screen now. And first of all, I'm very happy that you have seen the Camunda Modular Tooltip plugin, because this gives me the opportunity to talk about one of my other contributions that I did, namely the external task retry aspect. That is a little contribution that you can use as Spring Boot starter when you work with external tasks, and especially with the Java client provided by Camunda. I've started this contribution because when coming from the legendary Java delegate that you use when you have most probably a Spring Boot application and you use the delegate expression, then you have the Java delegate that we have seen before, which forces you to implement the execute method. And in there, you can implement any business logic you want to, or you have to implement. So you can auto-wire beans and call methods there. And if you have some return value, you are able to store this in the process context using the execution object in here. And the good thing is that even if there happens some error, you already have some fallback retry behavior, so to say, which you can even configure using the process model. So there is the retry time cycle there. And with a special notation, you can say that even if there is any kind of error, you want to try 3 times in a row of 5 minutes. So there is a fallback, which is not great, but it's also not terrible. And when you switch to external task handler, there is another interface, namely the external task handler interface, which comes also from the official Java client provided by Camunda. And you might come to the point that you want to transform your business logic that has been implemented in the Java delegate before and put it simply in the external task handler here within the execute method. And there is a slightly different, there are slightly different objects here. You have the task, the external task object and the external task service object. You can still use auto-wiring or dependency injection of your business services, call the business logic module, and then you have to call the task service in order to complete the, well, externally provided task. But there is one drawback. If there is any kind of exception, unchecked exception, then you have no fallback retry behavior. And it's also not configurable because this property here in the properties panel is functionless in case of external tasks. And in this very case, you would have created an infinitive loop because the code execution would never reach the task service complete method because it will be escaped before. So you will come to the point that you probably add some try-catch block in each of your external task handlers, which might look something like this. So you wrap your business code in the try block, and you want to catch any exception that might occur. And in the error case, you have the handle failure method in your task service object. So you can say that there was an error and you want to quit the task using the handle failure method. Okay. You give some error details here. And you can say how many retries you want to give the engine to provide the task again, which is not a good idea to hard code this with the 3 here, but you can ask the task to get the number of retries that are allowed, which is initially null. So you have to handle this. And you might want to start with the, well, in this case, before, because during the first iteration, it is already subtracted by 1. So in the end, you have 3 retries. And after that, when you set the number of retries to 0 or negative, then there will be the incident shown in the cockpit. So with this, with this implementation, you have a decreasing retry behavior, and probably you want to add some increasing timeout behavior. So with this small evaluation, you have the next timeout related to the number of retries you have. So with each retry, you have 1 minute more. And the external task handler retry aspect is a small Spring Boot starter that you can add to your project, which this with this is automated. So all you have to do is use the external task retry aspect and add it as dependency in your POM. You can state some default values, the default retry behavior, but you do not have to. And the retry aspect wraps around the execute method. And with that, you already have some basic fallback retry behavior you know from the Java delegate world. And you could also control the retry behavior for each and every external task in the process model using the extension in the property panel. So with the retry aspect Spring Boot starter, this code will work with the very basic retry behavior, which is not great, but still not terrible. And there's one more thing that the retry aspect brings to you, namely 2 more kinds of typed errors, namely the external task business error that produces some BPMN error that you have to catch in the process model. And there is the possibility to throw instant incident exceptions. That means if you say a null pointer stays a null pointer, doesn't matter how often you retry a task, then you can decide to throw an instant incident exception that will skip the retry behavior and immediately create an incident in the cockpit. So a very helpful little tool, Spring Boot starter, that is, you can have a look at it on GitHub and use it from Maven Central.
That's super. Thank you so much, Florian. I do love this because I think as somebody who speaks to the community on a fairly frequent basis, especially when we have problems, that infinite loop that you demonstrated in the very beginning, I have seen that many times where people quite rightly expect the engine to decrement the number of retries and then subsequently realize that that actually doesn't happen. The client must do it.
Yeah, well, it happened to me as well, to be honest.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it is not an uncommon thing. So it's really nice that this solution like legitimately came out of frustration that there was some engine stuff. And I really love the neatness of how that works. It's a really good thing. So I'm going to, as I did with Tobias, I'm going to ask you some, maybe 2 questions that have come in. The first one is probably the most, I'm going to pick this one here. At the moment, this is just available in Java, but because this is an external task, is it possible to make this available, or is it easy to make this available in other languages?
I'm a Java developer, so I'm not really capable of programming in other languages. So feel free to adapt this. Yeah.
But like, I guess there's no real reason why somebody couldn't look at what you've already written and then try to adapt that with whatever.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's hosted on GitHub.
Nice. That's super. The other, there's a discussion around transaction boundaries. And I guess the differences between how the transaction boundaries are differently affected based on the external tasks and the Java delegates that you mentioned at the beginning, and also about execution listeners, how they're executed. So, for instance, if we have, for example, a scenario where we have an error that throws back from an external task, does it still trigger a execution listener, do you know, at the end of the event, or would it not?
I personally go the way that whenever I implement an external task, that then I mark this as asynchronous after.
Mm.
So when I implement Java delegates, I use asynchronous before, so that I have a clear transaction action boundary before the execution of the delegate. And with the external task world, I switch to asynchronous after, so that the external task handler completes the task, and everything afterwards is job of the engine, I would guess. And so I would say that the listener to the task is executed by the engine, and the external task handler does not recognize the error from the listener. But I would have to try it.
But I think it's really good advice that you gave there, and I think it's just really good as a best practice to make sure that if you do have a big model and you have external tasks, I think generally asynchronous after is a very good idea.
Yes.
Otherwise, you end up getting weird engine errors thrown back to your external task, which is not really how that should work. So
yes.
yeah. Top tip there: asynchronous after on external tasks. Super duper. Thanks so much, Florian. I will come back to you again at the end. And I will now pass it along to one of my colleagues, Rin. They are going to be discussing one of the things that you may have come across if you're involved in the community in any way in the last little while is the Community Hub. This is all down to Rin, well, not all down to Rin, but very much Rin's baby at this stage. And it's been a huge success and really inspired quite a lot of developers to continue maintaining things because it becomes so much easier and becomes a lot more supportive of them from Camunda's perspective. So Rin's going to have a quick chat and let you guys know about that now. Rin, take it over.
Absolutely. Well, for those that may not be aware of the Camunda Community Hub, it is a GitHub organization that houses our Camunda community contributed extensions. And as of today, there are 123 repositories in there, which is pretty awesome. And for anyone that's looking to get started, your first port of call should absolutely be, if I can share my screen real quick, share tab, can I do that? Oh. All right, well, we're going to see my disaster of a desktop. That's fine. It's not as bad as David's, so I'm happy. The Camunda Community Hub and the /community repo should be your first port of call, because that will tell you not only what the Community Hub is, and it gives you the answer as to why you should actually migrate there. And the simple answer is that it's more efficient. The Community Hub as a whole aims to reduce issues regarding continual maintenance and infrastructure related to community extensions. So we're hoping to make that developer experience for maintainers better. And we're also hoping to make that contributor experience pipeline easier for new contributors and previous contributors that might be coming back into a project as well. So for getting started, there's also a guide to how to transfer an existing community extension that's in a Camunda organization or one that's in your personal GitHub account. These are two very different things, or one that's in your company's organization. So there are instructions for that that are available right on GitHub. They're just in the GitHub docs, how to transfer a repo. And then that's really actually pretty painless, honestly. So if you just follow these instructions here, that it says transferring a repo in your personal GitHub account, you can transfer that and then just follow the instructions, danger zone, click transfer, and then you'll transfer it to the Camunda Community Hub, and that will be all set, which is great. And then there's also instructions on issue triage, maintainer expectations for reviewers, things to include in your extensions README file, etc. So another fun thing that the Community Hub has is a really nice use of issue labels and project status badges. For example, our Maven release is a proof of concept, and that means that this is actually, it's still in a work in progress. It is continuously updated, and it is actually still one of those things that you can try out, but it's not necessarily, there will probably be bugs, there will probably be a few issues, but you can still use it, it still works, but it's not necessarily usable in production per se. They're experimental, not necessarily stable, just like something that we're trying to validate a proof of concept and find collaborators to work on that project to get it to the next phase of that project, which would be incubate. So that would be some degree of stability. And then it has active maintenance is actively updated, and that it might still have like documentation gaps, roadblocks, etc. And then there's also the stable lifecycle badge, which for reference, Micronaut achieved probably 3 or 4 weeks ago. So Micronaut clearly has an active, thriving community surrounding it. The maintainers of that community are amazing. And a stable community extension means that this is stable. It is used somewhere in production. You can expect regular updates. You can expect really well-defined contributor ladder, etc. So if you see the lifecycle stable badge on a Community Hub extension, you know you're in a good place. So that's basically our Community Hub in a nutshell. And feel free to explore our wide variety of repos. And if you are looking for something in these last 2 days of Hacktoberfest to contribute to, you can click on the Hacktoberfest topic and submit a pull request to any of these wonderful repos. They would love to have you. And if not, that's okay. But again, we welcome all contributors, and feel free to have a look at any of the repos that are in the Community Hub and see if anything strikes your fancy. And if you're interested in contributing, we'd love to have you.
Marvelous. Thank you so much, Rin. And we'll be hearing more about pull requests from Danielle just in a few minutes. But I did have a quick question from you for you from the audience, which is
Awesome.
What is a good starting point for a beginner who knows very little about Camunda's code base at all? Is there a specific way that they should get started?
My best thing, what I would recommend to get started would be to check out whatever repo really interests you and dig into that README. Get into the README, look at their contributor guidelines. And where I always suggest people start is with documentation. Everyone loves documentation, or at least they should. They should love documentation. And if you help improve the docs, that gives you not only a basis for getting a better understanding of not only how that code functions, but the instructions for using it in the proper way. So you should definitely write the docs, contribute to documentation first, really read through that, and make an effort to make some pull requests that improve the documentation of the project you're looking at. And in terms of getting started, there's a variety of, like I said, there's 123 repos. I'm always welcoming contributions to our /community repo to help make that better. We're also always looking for help with our community action Maven release if you enjoy things such as GitHub Actions and YAML. And of course, our Community Hub release parent, we're also looking for help there too. If you enjoy, again, POMs and all of those other wonderful things that help automate releases to Maven Central. So we'd love help there. And I'm sure that any of the maintainers in the hub would be happy to have you. But my first suggestion is always read the docs, and then that will help you understand the project better.
Marvelous. Who doesn't love reading? It always transports you to new worlds and new repositories. Super. Thank you very, very much, Rin. Again, if we have time, I will get a few more questions towards you because there are quite a few questions.
Awesome.
But for now, I shall pass along to Danielle, my hair buddy. Danielle's going to discuss Hacktoberfest, this is now in the 2nd year that's been organized by Danielle. And we have some fun stats and information to show.
Yeah. So hello, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are. It's early morning for me where I am. And as such, I literally just in that last little bit of Rin's presentation realized I was like, I should have worn my Hacktoberfest shirt. And I had plans to do this, but I had to wake up very early for this, so I forgot. I'm also going to share my screen here for a minute. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Hacktoberfest, it is an annual celebration of all things open source created by DigitalOcean. I believe this is their 8th consecutive year running. And as Niall said, this is our 2nd year participating as a company. If you go to camunda.com/Hacktoberfest 2021, you'll see this fancy landing page that has all the information you could ever want about participating in Hacktoberfest at Camunda. There's links here to some different organizations, including the Community Hub, as Rin just talked about. There's this lovely process model that I made and then Nele made significantly better. So thank you, Nele, for that. Some advice about getting started, some ways to contribute, And then finally here at the bottom, we have the submission form. So if you submit 4 pull requests to any of our Camunda organizations, like repositories within our Camunda organizations, including the Camunda Community Hub, and if those pull requests are considered valid, they will receive the Hacktoberfest accepted label from the maintainer. And then you can just pop links to those in here with some information about yourself and get yourself a t-shirt featuring this design on it. Again, like I said, should have worn mine to demonstrate, but that's all right. As Niall said, or as you might be aware, Hacktoberfest ends at the end of the month. So we've got just a couple of days left. So if you're interested in participating, as Rin showed you on the Community Hub, you can search by the Hacktoberfest topic. You can do that in any of our organizations also to look for pull requests that are already labeled with Hacktoberfest. But to give you an idea of where we're at so far, this time of the month, it's late, 28 days, I can't talk anymore. So far we have 50 valid contributions. That means they've received the Hacktoberfest accepted label. We've also received a lot of spam, but 50 valid contributions by 20 different contributors is great, across 15 different repos in these 4 organizations, which is just great. I've also received feedback from some of our maintainers that the quality of pull requests are much higher this year, which is always good to have quality over quantity, I think, personally. So yeah, I'll end it there before I take too much time rambling about stats and pretty graphs. Any questions rolling in for me now?
Yes, and if anything that Optimize has shown us in the last couple of years is that people love graphs and stats. So there's no problem there. I don't think you can bore anybody with that. Yeah, we do have a question about, but I think you actually may have already answered it, somehow predicting that someone would ask this. Somebody asked if it was already too late to win a t-shirt. And
no. As long as your pull requests are submitted before midnight on the 31st in your time zone, whatever time zone that is, you can still qualify. So yeah, that form will stay up past the end of October for a little bit, because you can still make those contributions right up until the deadline, and they can receive the accepted label after the end of the month.
Marvelous. So, and this video will go up tomorrow, so you'll have even less time if you're watching this on YouTube. So yeah, code as fast as I speak or Tobias actually codes. You can pick one of those. Super duper. Thanks so much, Danielle. And it's a really fun thing to do, and it's really nice to see where the stats are coming from, because we saw quite a lot of contributions to the Camunda Cloud organization, which is really nice to see. There is a nice community there. And BPMNIO, of course, which is what the modeling tool is built on, has a huge amount of, as Florian suggested already, where his plugin, which I actually also have in mine, and I saw Tobias has in his. I think everyone I know I tell to install that plugin. It's really, really good. Not to belittle the Retry project as well, Florian. So thank you very, very much. What I'll do now is I will pick a bunch of random questions and ask people about them. So for the next maybe 5-10 minutes until we get through them all. So let's see what we got. So there's a random question about a database. I'm going to answer that one because why not? And the question is, does Camunda have any plans to support Y gigabyte database, which is one I've never heard of, YUAGA byte? But don't worry, because I did a quick Google search while people were talking. So it's a distributed SQL database. And first of all, no, we have no plans to support this database. But we have, if you're interested, I guess you're interested in using this because it's distributed. So we do support CockroachDB, which I think is the most similar database that would sort of apply to those sort of criteria. But in reality, I think most people use this for performance reasons. Camunda's got pretty good performance even on non-distributed databases. So you really do need to be able to, you really do have to have a lot of throughput to even sort of creak at the end. About 1,000 instances a second is usually where you're going to start to see things like, you know, tearing at the seams. But that's usually pretty okay. And we supported, I think, Cockroach as of the release 6 months ago. And we haven't had a huge amount of people using it, judging on the stats that we get from the telemetry. Very, very few people have picked up on it. So I guess they either don't really need that kind of throughput, or they don't really like CockroachDB, because in fairness, the name is kind of icky, which is why I wouldn't use it. So that is a question for that's that one done. So I got a quick question then from this is a fun discussion. Tobias, I will throw this to you because it's about Micronaut. When you use Camunda with Spring Boot, when would you use Camunda with Spring Boot versus Micronaut? So you mentioned in your original answer to the question I asked before that, hey, it's if you know how Spring Boot works, Micronaut's gonna be pretty easy. So why would someone want to abandon their lovely Spring Boot project for Micronaut?
Well, generally, both solutions are quite similar, right? They both have an embedded Camunda. The development model, as I said, is quite similar. So if you're using the one, you could use the other one as well. The difference is when you're using Micronaut, it's, as I previously said, it's optimized regarding memory usage or the start time. So if that is important for you because you're, for example, deploying in the cloud, you want to scale up, you want to scale down, you're paying for every megabyte in the cloud, or maybe your integration tests are running too long, because the application context is being built too often, then it might be a good idea to think about Micronaut. And of course, if you're coming from Micronaut, I think it's the perfect solution because there's not a single other solution, to my knowledge, with which you can implement process automation in the context of Micronaut. And that's what the Micronaut developers say. So I think that would be a very compelling, unique selling point. But of course, if you're already using Spring Boot, then I think it's the performance aspect. And maybe just one thing there, you can actually compile Micronaut applications natively using GraalVM. And for example, with the external worker, we currently have startup times of, for example, 35 milliseconds from scratch, including connecting to the server. So if that is important to you, I think it would be good idea to have a look at Micronaut.
Super duper. Thanks a lot for that. So another question that I actually thought of that I'm kind of interested in Florian's perspective on is you mentioned at the very beginning the differences between Java delegates and external tasks. I wonder, let's imagine you use Java and you can use Java for both, right? So do you have a preference? If you were starting a brand new project, would you always use external tasks or would you prefer to use delegates?
I would prefer to try to build a process application using Spring Boot because I'm very familiar with that. And if I come to the point that I have a Java delegate that is consumes very much computing time or something like this, then I would try to think to externalize this as an external task worker, because this I can independently scale up.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've seen good solutions. I like the, I do like using Spring Boot as well. I tend to build most of my projects as well with Spring Boot and Java delegates, unless I have a multi-instance of any kind that I need to run in like multi-threaded sort of speed. And I think you're right, external tasks are then quite useful for when you want to scale up. Cool, thanks for that. Okay, we're already a little over time, but I think we've got a few more questions, so we'll try to answer some of those. We have a Community Hub one, which I think might have been answered, but Rin will let me know. Is there a good way to find out which projects in the Community Hub are looking for contributors? Is there like a tag or something? Or
there is the good first issue label. If you search for that, you will see things that are good first issues on any of the repositories in the Camunda Community Hub. Some use it, some don't, but it is the most common one. I would say look for that good first issue label. Super,
thank you so much. Nele, you've been really quiet, so I'm going to throw a random question about listeners to you. Is there a workaround for ensuring that execution of external task listeners of the same type? The forum mentions composite design pattern on how this is done, but do you understand how you might ensure the order of execution listeners can run
on the same event?
Yeah,
is that the question?
Yeah.
That's a good question, and I don't want to give an answer that's not correct here. So if someone has an idea, I would give the question to someone else, because
Maybe it's the order of the listeners in the XML of the BPMN file.
I think that's probably a pretty okay answer, actually. Yeah, but I think you can't even guarantee that. I don't even think that can be sure, but that's the nearest thing to exactly how it should run. But I think it kind of depends, I think, because I don't think you can guarantee it.
also I just remember that I had a talk about anti-patterns, and having too many execution listeners at the same time at one task, for example, is an anti-pattern. So if there are so many already, maybe there is some logic that needs to go as a business logic, just as a hint as well. I'm not sure. I don't know the process. I don't know the question, like what the problem is. And yeah.
Yeah, I actually think you're absolutely right in the sense that if you care about the execution order, you shouldn't be using execution listeners in the same event. It's basically that simple, because there's no way to guarantee it. There's loads of other ways of executing code. I think, Nele, you're right. This is a bit of a mental pattern if you wanted to do that. So there's a bunch of ways of doing it. You could trigger an event subprocess or something in a specific order. That sort of thing works. But beyond what Florian said about the XML order, which I think is a bit janky, I don't think there's a great solution for that. But a very good question, and a question that deserves a beer. So I'll find out whoever that was, and the person who stumped myself, Nele, and to a lesser extent Florian, they will get some kind of beer anyway, if I can find out who they are. So I think that brings us close to the end of this, and there's so many people joining that it feels a shame to leave you to let you all escape. But that's what's going to have to happen, unfortunately. And Danielle gets to go back to bed, which is quite nice, and everyone else gets to enjoy the rest of the day. So let me quickly say that the last thing we'll talk about is we have lots of Camunda events all the time. So many that I used to actually tell you which events were upcoming at this section of the question corner. And I looked, and there's just too many. There's too many upcoming. Go and do the work yourself. If you go to camunda.com/events, there's a wonderful page there which shows the various webinars, meetups, workshops, and conferences that Camunda-oriented stuff will be happening on, as well as whereabouts it's happening. So maybe you are hanging out in London next week, in which case you might see me at DevOps, or you're at W2F Cloud Native next week, in which case you'll see Nele talk about stuff. But all of that is available on the events page. There is one event that I would like to plug, which is the Camunda Community Summit. If you look behind me, I have last year's poster still proudly on my wall. This is where I live, in the Camunda offices. And right under that desk is where I sleep. Now, this is a fantastic conference. It pairs with CamundaCon in the sense that CamundaCon talks about quite big ideas to quite high-level architectures and that sort of thing. The Community Summit, a lot like this Question Corner episode, is all about community and about how people are giving back to the community and how we can help people who want to get involved in the community. We are opening for a call for papers next week, I'm being reliably informed. And if you are a developer who's building a thing, or you're a developer who's using Camunda and has a fun example you want to talk about, or you find something that might be useful for developers, head along and to the website and to let us know you're interested in. If you want to hear from people, you can register right now. Yes, so that is a thing that is open. If you are interested in other bits and pieces from Camunda on a more regular basis, Luca does this wonderful developer newsletter that has, again, loads of new projects that are being put into the Community Hub. Usually Luca will add that to the newsletter, so you'll always have a really good update on what kind of cool things are happening from the community. Yes, there's my thank you slide, which always means now I'll stop talking. So I will stop talking and say thank you very much, of course, to my co-host Nele. I will thank you very much to our two Camunda champions, Florian and Tobias. Thank you very, very much, of course, to Danielle and Rin, who have woken up far too early in some cases, and have woken up their cat in one case to say hello to us today. So thanks again. And of course, Stacey and Kaya, who are not visible to you, but in the background, they make all it work. So thanks again. And we will see you next month, perhaps the last Thursday of the month, or perhaps you might see some of us at various events or on the Community Hub. So talk to you all then. Goodbye, everybody.